the end of the day, performance in the business is about how people choose to respond to things. How many R factor decisions does the average person make in a day? I mean, it's huge. And so the outcomes that you get are it's the collective responses. And then you multiply that times the number of employees in the business. So one of the greatest gifts that you can give to people in a business is teach them how to manage the R.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I am very, very excited for today's guest. Quite frankly, Tim is a leadership wizard. So Tim Kight is the founder and CEO of Focus 3. Their mission is to maximize the effectiveness of leaders, strength of the culture, and impact on people. Tim has been doing this for more than 30 years, and they have a clear, simple approach to building actionable and accountability in organizations that end up helping them produce exceptional results. Quite frankly, another thing about Tim, he was instrumental he is a national champion leadership coach, if I must say, for the Buckeyes. He was very influential for the Buckeyes in their national championship run in 2014. And at a personal level, Tim has had a great impact on me in my professional career and kind of leadership journey and figuring out effective ways to become a better leader, because he was a trainer for me at my prior role in the corporate world. So Tim Kight, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing great, Phil. I'm glad we're doing this.
Awesome. Well, first, Tim, I want to get started. You've been doing this for a long time. What inspired your journey into this leadership and organizational effectiveness world?
Yes. The background, the genesis of this, I ran track at Ohio State my freshman year, and then I transferred to UCLA, and I had the opportunity to interact with John Wooden, the great legendary basketball coach at UCLA, and watching him do what he did so well, the Wizard of Westwood, was a factor, a motivating factor. And he and I got to interact personally on a irregular basis.
Okay.
And then I read the book Man's Search for Meaning, which is Viktor Frankl's story of surviving the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. And when he would describe the mindset that he had as he navigated that horrendously, almost impossibly difficult situation, and the mindset he brought to it and retained, and then of course he wrote the book after he got out. That book really shaped me in that, number one, I recognized when I read that book, I didn't have that kind of mindset he had. I wasn't that kind of mentally tough. I wasn't that resilient, wasn't that mentally strong. And I wanted to be. And I'm young, right, at the time. I'm real young at the time. I'd been national champion myself in my track event in high school. So I'd had a false sense of my, very false sense of my achievements and how good I was or where my gaps were, which is understandable at 18, 19 years of age. But as I began to get exposed to the literature and began to watch what's happened in the world, I recognized that great things happen because of great leaders in athletics and business and community. And I frankly saw a lot of the opposite, Phil, which is poor things happen because of ineffective leaders.
Yep.
And so that was the genesis. Those things motivated me. So I began to study human performance, began to study neuroscience, began to study the psychology of people, if you will. And then I began to study leadership itself. And what emerged was some really powerful, and you used the term before we started, sticky tools.
Yep.
That are easy to remember, and that's where it came from.
Well, in our first like 3 minutes, I just wrote some notes. First, John Wooden and Man's Search for Meaning. There's 2 books right here on my desk that are just have been really impactful to me early on. And if I had to guess, I wonder if I picked them up because of you, Tim. I can't sign off on that completely. But one thing that you said, and then I'll come back to your story a little bit, but you said you basically, I'll paraphrase it, mindset can change and you can control mindset. And I remember working through your mindset cycle that you have and thinking, no, I can't change. Like it's fixed, right? And it's been an evolution for me. So talk about that a little bit. How does one change their mindset?
Yeah, I mean, that's a massive topic today. And we can approach it in a very diplomatic conversation, or we can approach it in a very candid, a little bit more confrontational, if you will. But I'll take the latter. I'm a coach.
As long as you're not going to dissect me on air here, Tim, I think
No,
the direct,
not
let's
you.
let's get to it. I like it.
I just think that we're living in emotionally fragile times. We're living where people are mentally weak. And it's funny, when you say that to certain people, they wig out, they get angry, they get frustrated. I say, see, I make the statement that we're living with people are mentally weak, and you get upset?
Right.
That tells me you're mentally weak. Mindset is the result of, it's how you think about yourself, how you think about the world and yourself in the world. Mindset is the mental state you bring to any given situation of life. And and you mentioned the cycle. When we first wrote the R Factor, when we first developed the tool, the elements of the cycle are focus, self-talk, feeling, action. That's the cycle of the human mind. That when I'm confronted with something, I'm driving on the freeway, somebody tailgates me. Well, the first thing I do is I have a focus frame about that. I focus on some aspect of the tailgater. The second thing that happens, Phil, in my mind is I talk to myself.
Yep.
I've got internal dialogue. I tell myself a story. I got self-talk. Moron, idiot, or I'll come back. That's not good self-talk, but that's what we often say.
Yep.
So we focus on what we don't like. We have a negative self-talk. Well, that immediately feeds negative emotion.
Yep.
Negative energy. And those are the feelings. And so focus, self-talk create our feelings, and then feelings drive our action.
Yep.
And feelings are both psychological and physical. It's not just one or the other. It's both. It's a psychological state and a physiological state. Everyone knows this, right? You can feel the physiological consequences of certain emotional states. Anger or fear, calm, cool, patient. You can feel that your heart rate and all that kind of stuff. So focus, self-talk, feeling, action is a simple but effective and very accurate tool that we use to help people understand. You choose what to focus on.
Yep.
You choose what to say to yourself. And whatever you choose in those 2 things, you feed your feelings. And then whatever your feelings you're feeding, that's going to affect what you do. So that's the mindset cycle. And so the big message to people is this: how you feel is not the result of the situations that you experience. How you feel is a result of your focus and self-talk about the situations that you experience. So the guy's tailgating me, and I can see it negative and call him a moron and flip him off. Or I can say to myself, I can focus on safety, focus on being calm, focus on listening to whatever, the podcast or the music I'm listening to, and check my rear view mirrors, press pause, gain clarity about the situation, move over and just say to myself, be safe, move over, let him go. My choice.
Right.
2 very different mindsets. And if you recall from our teaching, there's 2 ways to live your life: above the line with discipline, but below the line on default.
Right. I remember
and
I remember teaching this for, by the way. I'm just going to try to get out of the way on this episode because I just want you to keep rolling. But I remember teaching this to a class that drove in from Indiana, and they talked about it was a 2-day thing. And the morning of the second day of class, after we had talked about it, there was a fender bender, and they had this mindset, and it could have been a really bad situation, but because of it, it ended up being really calm, and the person that was being confronted was in a really bad state of mind, and it basically ended up, who knows how bad the situation could have gotten, I guess. And I forget the details, but the key of all that is, and what I remember, Tim, see, think, feel, act. You said the same
Yeah.
thing in a different way, but that's what I
Yeah.
remember is, and what see is what I focus on, and how I'm perceiving the situation, the questions I'm asking that then create, okay, what am I thinking? How am I talking to myself? Which really is the critical part of the mindset cycle, because that's where it starts.
Yeah, same thing. See, think, feel, act is another way we say it.
Yep.
Another visual, verbal, emotional, behavioral. Another way we say it, and it just represents what goes on in the brain. And the thing that's important about it is again that we have the ability to choose and to change how we see and what we say. And emotion feeds on verbal input. Emotion feeds on visual input. Whatever you choose to frame a situation, how you see it, however you choose to think about it, and we think in words, we
Yep.
think of stories and phrases. But most important choices you make is the voice inside your head.
Right. And
And people are running.
you talked about a lot of times, who talks to you more than anyone else, that, right?
Yeah, you talk to yourself more than anybody else, so get really good at it.
Yep.
It's a great statement. And I see so many people today, they're reactionary. They don't respond, they react. And unfortunately, they've trained themselves to be on default. And it's easy to be on default. It's easy to be negative because there is something called negativity bias in the human brain.
Okay.
And negativity bias is the human brain's preference for the negative as opposed to the positive. That human mind sees problems before it sees solutions. It's risk averse. It's loss averse, and it's easily afraid. It's easily frustrated. It's easily angered. So we look for the thing that angers us. We look for the thing that scares us. We look for the thing that we don't like, and we fixate on it. And then we talk to ourselves about it. And oftentimes, almost subconscious. So when we do these workshops and do this teaching, it's so interesting to step back and get people. And we do have a worksheet that we use where people have to fill out. And we start with the example I just gave you of the car, where people have to fill out the worksheet. Like what would a default mindset look like? Like what would it feel? What self-talk fed that negative emotion, and what did it focus on? And then we'll move into things like listening. What mindset drives discipline listening? What mindset drives default listening? We'll move into change. What mindset drives discipline? Mindset drives effective change, embracing change. What mindset drives resistance to change? And when people recognize that, oh, wait a second, there's a system here. It's got 4 points to it: focus, self-talk, feeling, action. And I've got choices. I don't have to feel this way.
Right.
Now, what throws people off, Phil, and this is what throws people off, of the 4 things: focus, self-talk, feeling, action, you can immediately change 3 of them by a choice. But one of them lags. And the one that lags is feeling.
Yep.
That you can change your focus just right now. I'm going to reframe that right now. I'm fixated on the negative. I'm going to look for solutions. You can do that right now on anything.
And that will change your emotion, right? That will ultimately result in a change of emotion. But if you don't change that, your emotion won't change. Is that how to understand that?
That's correct. But here's why this mindset cycle is hard for a lot of people. And I can change my self-talk. And so I go through the training. I learn how to change my focus on my self-talk with the anticipation my feelings will change quickly. Well, not at first. Not necessarily. You'll have an impact on them right away. but it takes time.
Yep.
Because here's why: emotion, once you've given birth to an emotion through focus and self-talk, that emotion is tenacious, and it demands the story that is fed it all along. It's like the emotion has a life of its own. What do you mean we're not angry about that? It's like the emotion
Right.
is saying, you've always talked to me about how angry we are about that. What do you mean you're not angry? Where's the angry self-talk? Where's the angry story?
Yep.
And you got to almost like personify it yourself, and you got to tell your anger, no, we're not, I'm not going to feed you anymore.
Well, I love the topic of mindset, and we could stay there a lot, but I want to step back a little bit because mindset and the management of your mindset is a piece of the puzzle here to the R factor, which is kind of the bigger, broader lesson, and quite frankly, the core, I think, of your teaching. So, at a really high level, what is the R factor?
Yeah, it's based on the equation E plus R equals O, which is event plus response equals outcome. And the message in E plus R equals O is that you don't control the event, you don't directly control the outcome, but you always have the ability to control how you choose to respond. And so the R in that equation is that's the R factor. And that R, that response, is the one thing in life that you can evaluate, change, and improve to produce better outcomes, personally and professionally. And it's really amazing when you come to the realization you do not control events. They happen and you don't control them. But you do have the ability to respond. And my social media post this morning was, what was it? I'll just read it right here real quick. Yeah, you can curse the wind and fight the current, or you can adjust your sails. The wind and waves favor the skilled captain.
And I follow, just for everyone, I follow Tim on LinkedIn, like hit Twitter. We'll get to that later, but if you're on social media, follow positive things. And Tim and Brian, quite frankly, Focus 3, they're a great group to follow. So E plus R equals O. Tim, actually, another book that you had referenced at some point in time is the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink that I read several years ago. And the mindset of extreme ownership is taking total control, I think, in a way, of your life and I guess it's easy to perceive that as the outcome versus the response. So if I go back to your equation, so I don't control the outcome, am I a victim then? Or talk me through that thought process a little bit.
Yeah, great question. You earn the outcome by the quality of your response. And that's one of the things I love the most about E plus R equals O is it's a simple, accurate system that describes the way life works. And here, how about this? Real straightforward. If you want a better outcome, choose a better response. And for every outcome you want, there is a discipline response available to you. Again, back to discipline over default.
Yep.
I can have a discipline R or I can have a default R. And a discipline R produces a very different outcome than a default R. And I get to choose. And the other thing is that the ERO, the outcome is giving you feedback about the effectiveness of your R. And what back to my point about mental weakness and our emotional fragility today, that when people don't get the outcome that they want, what do they tend to do? They don't look to themselves. They don't take, to use Jocko's term, extreme ownership of themselves. When they don't get the outcome that they want, they immediately look to the E, the event, the situation, the circumstance. Oh my gosh, I'm not getting the O that I want. And they start what we call BCD. They blame, they complain, they defend, and they whine and make excuses. Well, that is undermining your own efficacy. That's giving up the agency that you have. And that is literally turning your back away from the one thing that you control, the one thing, because I don't control the E, I don't control the O, but I do control the R. And the only way to a better O is a better R, period. And the challenge that people face is, one, there's just tons of social support for victimhood. There's tons of social support for blaming, complaining, and defending. It's very social. And people don't do that. They don't whine and complain by themselves. They're recruiters. They recruit others into it. I gave a keynote here recently, actually this week in Memphis for the largest bank in the South. top 275 leaders, and I went over R factor. And as I shared these principles and these disciplines, their eyes got really big, and you could see that they were recognizing, hey, our bank's going to perform based on how 7,500 people, employees, manage their R factor, which is 100% true. The way employees to talk, if you got business people who will follow your podcast, my message to them is this: every single thing that happens in your business, and strategy is important, and I get all that. Certainly I do. I mean, I've got a business, and we are very focused on strategy and technology and process and things. But at the end of the day, performance in the business is about how people choose to respond to things. How many R factor decisions does the average person make in a day? I mean, it's huge. And so the outcomes that you get are it's the collective responses. And then you multiply that times the number of employees in the business. So one of the greatest gifts that you can give to people in a business is teach them how to manage the R.
Yep. And
because that's the one thing they control.
And you talked about recruiters of, so just for the audience, picture BCD with a big red circle with a line through it is what I remember saying. There is zero value to BCD. These are Tim's words that he taught me, but it adds nothing to the equation. And the concept of recruiters of BCD, aka gossiping and other stuff, it starts to be a part of a culture. So I want to shift gears a little bit to
but that's I winced when you said that, because I'm so aware of that because of the work that we do in so many businesses. And BCD is toxic. It damages everything that it touches. So you're right. You're 100% correct on that, Phil.
So I want to talk about the opposite of BCD, or discipline and, performance pathway. Leaders create the culture that drive behavior that gets results. And there can be recruiters of the right culture, the right mindset, the right approach, the right response. So talk about for the business leaders, for the aspiring business leaders, quite frankly, for just anyone in any organization, because you don't need a title to be a leader either. Tell me more about the performance pathway and leadership and culture, and what do those things mean?
Yeah, so the performance pathway is that leaders create the culture that drives the behavior that produces results. Leaders create the culture that drives the behavior that produces results. That's the performance pathway. And it's really powerful because it represents literally everything that happens in the business is subject to the physics of that pathway. And
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that the big message there again is, if you look at the pathway of leadership, culture, behavior, results, it says that all results are produced by how people choose to behave. And then it says that behavior is collective behavior, group behavior, culture is what drives that. And if you want great outcomes, you need great behavior. You want great behavior, you need a culture that supports it. That if you ask for behavior in your strategy that's not supported by your culture, you're going to struggle to execute.
Yep. And if you create
great behavior will not survive a culture that doesn't support it, which is an interesting statement. Great behavior will not survive in a culture that doesn't support it. So if I want to behave effectively, if I want to be a great listener, a great teammate, I want to change, I want to be innovative, I want to, live the culture, but the organization doesn't, or my group doesn't, and I try to say, wait a second, we got a value statement, let's follow the values. And, well, no, we don't do it that way. And it gets toxic and goppy and all that. I'm either going to submit to that culture and become one of those cynical people, or I'm going to leave.
Yep.
Here's what is not going to happen. I'm not going to stay and fully engage and be full performance.
How does the opposite happen?
That's scary.
So core values, culture, all good, all in alignment. Poor behavior, poor person, poor attitude, whatever, that gets embedded in the positive culture. Is it the same? Does it work?
It does. And the way it works is you take each of those pieces, leadership, culture, behavior, and you have to focus on them. And you have to have a disciplined strategy for developing the leaders, the culture, and the people. That's what you have to do. There is no magic pill. There is no app. There is no like 1-2 thing that you can do. It's that's why we wrote R Factor. R Factor is the behavioral toolbox that teaches people how to behave with discipline rather than on default. That's why we develop what we call the culture blueprint and the power of culture process that we use to help organizations articulate what are our core beliefs, how do we want to behave based on those beliefs, and how to communicate that. And then we match R Factor with the culture statement. And we use a thing called 20 square feet, if you recall.
Yep, of course.
20 square feet is the principle that every
There.
single, there you go. Yeah, I love it. Every single person in a business has 20 square feet of ownership, 20 square feet of responsibility, 20 square feet of control. And inside the 20 square feet, they've got control. Outside, they've got impact. And the R Factor is the toolbox that equips people to own their 20 square feet.
And what I would say is that for the audience, these tools are all not just all phenomenal tools in and of themselves, but there's alignment and synchronization amongst these tools and how they work and how they tie together. And really, we'll come back to it at the end, but I just encourage you to check out the Focus 3 website and see some of these high-level tools, follow them, and learn more. Tim, I want to ask about the R Factor, and I want to show the audience how scalable it is. So I want to give an example of a really small R Factor situation and then the biggest R Factor situation you can think of, and just show, again, it's such a scalable, simple and scalable is how I think about it.
Yeah, it was designed for that. I mean, it is, I gave you one simple one, driving down the highway, someone tailgates you. Apply R Factor.
Yep.
You come home from work at night and your spouse wants to talk with you about something and you're tired, you're not interested in talking to your spouse. Apply the R Factor. Get your mind right, step up, get your mind right, press pause, lean in, have a conversation. And have it well, have it skillfully, have it on with discipline. It's very personal. It works at home. It works when you drive. It works at work. In this bank keynote that I did this week, we gave them, they've done a whole new strategy. It's a really cool bank. And they've got a strategy they're seeking to implement. So what we did is we put up on the screen after I gave 30 or so minute overview of the R Factor, is we gave them examples of events they're going to have to navigate to execute their strategy.
Yep.
And then you choose one of those events at your table, and there's a worksheet in front of them where it says E plus R equals O, where there's these boxes, and the E box is empty, and then there's a default box and a default box reaction, if you will, with an outcome, and then a discipline one. And we said, map out what would a default reaction look like to the event you choose, and what outcome would it produce? And what would it? There you go. You got it all.
It's a simple 2x2 matrix. But the key is, so you said earlier, you don't control outcomes. You only control response. I think though, the point here is that doesn't mean don't think about the outcome you want, right? So actually, from my understanding, define the outcome you want to drive the result.
So let me make a point about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So yeah, manage the R with the O in mind.
Right.
I'm a strategic user of the R Factor. I'm not reactionary. I'm responsive. I'm O-oriented. Like you asked me at the beginning. I've been going through cancer for 5 years, and it's rough. But I'm not E-oriented. I'm not cancer-oriented. I'm life-oriented. I'm marriage-oriented. I'm grandpa-oriented, which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
And I love, and my clients and my business, and I'm like, the alarm goes off in the morning, I don't think about how bad I feel. I feel bad. And I, the chemo, I've done everything, surgery, chemo, radiation, got to figure out what's next. But I don't worry about all that. And so manage the R with the O in mind and deal with events along the way. That's how you do it. And then here's what's interesting. This is a really interesting insight. Discipline over default. Default doesn't think about outcomes.
Right.
Default doesn't, it just reacts. And then all of a sudden it does something foolish. It does something ineffective. It does something less than optimal. And then it's surprise. wait a second, I reacted poorly to this event and I got a bad outcome, and it must be the E. Well, discipline does not think like that. Discipline asks the question, given the O that I want, what R do I need? And then I'm going to navigate events along the way. And often it's the whole system, like given the E that I have and the O that I want, what response do I need? But that's it. It's O oriented. And these bankers the other day, and they had this really cool list and they weren't fancy things. And again, there's about 7,500 people in this bank, and it's so interesting. And we accomplished what I was hoping that we would, which you got 250 of these leaders, 275 of these leaders who said, basically, yeah, our people need to be equipped with this tool. So one of the events you have to be good at when you're executing your strategy is listening. One of the events you have to be successful at and navigating and implementing in today's business is remote working. Another one is dealing with someone that has toxic BCD in a business. Another one is communication. Another one is having difficult conversations. And these are all E's, all events.
Right.
And if you don't apply something like E plus R equals O to that event in order to then focus on the outcome that you want and take the response necessary to get the O that you want with the constraints and realities of the E, then you get stuck. And so it was so incredible to watch them all to choose whichever E they wanted. And they, of course, reported out. And it's also, once you start talking about this, and I'm sure this has been your experience, and while we're still talking about it, even though you were trained in it years ago, is it like you said earlier, it's sticky.
Yep.
And it makes sense. And as they talked about it, and these leaders, they were all educating each other on E plus R equals O. They've been exposed to it for 30 or 45 minutes.
And the simplicity, I mean, just to I remember this. So my oldest is 13 now, but I've been talking about this in different ways for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years. And she gets it. It's that simple where now I don't know if my 4-year-old gets it, Tim, to be honest. I struggle a little bit there, but it's just so simple and so applicable. And again, it's so scalable. You just talked about some really small situations, a car, when you get home, this, in the grand scheme, really just silly things, quite frankly, that we probably default react to. But then you talked about your mindset and how you're controlling your response in a really, really difficult situation too. Just going through your cancer treatments and everything you're going through. So that's just a great, I don't know, recognition for the audience that Tim isn't here just teaching this stuff. He is living it as real as can be lived, and he is a believer in this stuff. So I appreciate that. And yeah, I don't know if you want to add anything about, again, the magnitude of this and where it can be applied in the biggest ways.
Yeah, I mean, scalability. You can look at scalability in terms of how many people in an organization have been trained in and are using R factor, or you can look at scalability as like the size of the event you're dealing with. And I don't know, but it's so interesting to me, and I put a number to this, which is funny. A size 5R will not achieve a size 10O. If I've got a size 10 outcome that I want, but my R factor capacity is size 5, I've only got 50% of what I need to get the O that I want. So you can play with the numbers on that a little bit and understand how scalable it is to use it for just the R factor itself. And then same thing, if I've got a size 5R and the E that I get is size 10, and cancer is size 10, size 100, that a little R will not work for a big E, is my point.
Yep.
And if I want to respond well to life's adversity, life's difficulty, then I'd better develop the resilience and the mental toughness and the tools that we teach in R factor to be able to handle that. And I'm quick to say, when the cancer topic comes up, I'm not telling anybody else, and there may be people who listen to your podcast who have friends or family that have cancer, or they themselves might have cancer or have had it or may have it in the future, because it's such a unfortunately such a prevalent and nasty disease. I'm not telling other people how to do it. I'm not saying you need to do it my way, but I am saying this toolbox that you're talking about, E plus R equals O, and that we developed and teach, it works. It works. And the thing is that you don't want to be caught in life, whether it's a small thing or a big thing. You don't want to be caught without some kind of a system to navigate through it with discipline. Because discipline wins and default loses, Phil. That's just that's life. And if you react on default to stuff, and how about this? I see this all the time. If you react on default all the time to small, medium things, and then you develop the default habit, you think default, your mindset's default, you lean towards the negative. I'm not saying you're that way all the time, but you just haven't built discipline mindset into your life. And so you tend to respond and react in a mediocre way. And then something really challenging happens. COVID, some big business change, something personal in your life, a disease or an injury, something genuinely adverse at a high level, and you've not developed the capacity to respond well, you're going to get your butt kicked by that E. So we say your R's most important when the E's most difficult. And when the E escalates, your R must elevate. And your R has to meet the demands of the E and the O. It has to. It's physics. And I think I'm so thrilled to have taught this to, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of people. But when that light bulb goes on and people recognize, oh my gosh, this works, and it's not terribly complex. And then like you, they say, I'm going to take this home to my kids.
Right.
In addition to teach it to my business. It's a pretty cool thing. And by the way, yes, your 4-year-old can understand it in a simple fashion, but be prepared, because your 4-year-old, probably your 13-year-old also,
I know
they'll definitely apply it to you first. It's like, Dad, above the line, Dad, not below the line. Come on, Dad.
If I'm smiling,
right,
Tim,
Dad.
it's because I may already be a victim of the E plus R equals response from them. But honestly, look, then now you're okay. Are we creating a family culture where you can hold people accountable? And that's great, right?
Yes.
So I'm okay with it. One thing that you taught, just the scalability and the magnitude of the E, the R, and the O, and like the preparedness for it, especially in a business world. If there's entrepreneurs or people that are growing, and if you outgrow, so you're creating events that are outgrowing your ability to lead or respond. That's also a dangerous thing too. So that's just something else I thought of. And throughout this conversation, quite frankly, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, Tim, how the heck am I going to pick a 20-second reel to put on social media? Because there's like a 40-minute reel straight right here of just I want to put it all out there. So this is amazing. Tim, I think you're in the process of writing a book. I want to ask you.
Well, it's the R Factor. Yeah, I'm writing the R Factor book. So that's what I'm doing. And then if I live long enough, I'm going to write another one, and on leadership. So yeah,
so tell me about
motivated.
I love it. Tell me about the timing of that book. What can people just watch for to make sure they're ready for it and looking for it?
Yeah, just follow us on social media, LinkedIn and X, former Twitter, and our website, focus3.com. And, and the other thing is we do a newsletter.
Okay.
And our newsletter comes out, it's direct to email, comes out on Tuesday mornings. And you can sign up right on our website, focus3.com. And a lot of the newsletter is content that's coming from the manuscript that I'm writing. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So,
it is a great thing to get. I get the Focus 3 newsletter. It is a great thing to get in your inbox, quite frankly, for you, for your team members. Like it's just real. Again, it's sticky. It's amazing. So, Tim, the other thing I had on my mind, and just like the biggest, how should I think about this? Scalability. The biggest O is like, what do I want out of my life? Like, what is purpose? Like, it's just, and then you can't control the events, but you can control the response, but that's not an instantaneous response. Like It's not, this isn't, what am I going to do in the next 10 seconds? This is, how am I planning for this? What is my strategy? Like what, the big questions, I guess. How do you think about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was reviewing the newsletter list because I've written newsletter for the next, I don't know, 4 months or so. And I'll write them and write, and then just let it sit, and then I'll come back and revisit and reread and edit mistakes I've made or change a phrase or so. I'm big on rewriting, which I've learned is the key to effective writing. And one of the newsletters coming up is on the topic of purpose. And what I would say is, or purpose or identity. We're struggling with identity. We're struggling with purpose. And so many people are trying to live in a way where they receive praise and avoid criticism. And what I have written in that newsletter that whenever it comes out here in this weeks or months or whatever, is you got to live purpose-centered, purpose-driven, principle-centered. You have to know your why. And it's got to be bigger than your business. And you have to know the principles by which you want to live your life, your standards. And what's really challenging about that, but also necessary, is you cannot absorb those from the surrounding society or culture. You have to choose them. Values are chosen or absorbed. And in today's social media world, people are absorbing stuff. They have not thought about it. They didn't do due diligence. They didn't say, where did that come from? Who wrote that? I studied Karl Marx sometime, who he was as a person. He was a horrible person. If you read anything about Karl Marx, you would not believe in any form of Marxism, because who he is matters. And I don't want to get necessarily political, but obviously you could hear my passion on that one. And I could give you others who are famous thinkers whose ideas have dominated our society. And again, people don't do their homework. They have no idea where that stuff comes from.
Right.
And it just gets popular. So what we have to do is stop and do some serious self-reflection and think deeply about the timeless principles that are not just for the 21st century America, not just the latest thing in our society, but timeless principles. What are things that were true 2,000 years ago and are going to be true 2,000 years from now? And build your life on those things. Make that your foundation. Build your business on those things, because those things don't change. And then the other thing is we've got to get rid of the idea that my identity is in my job. No. Your job is something you do. It's not who you are. You express who you are through your job, but who you are is separate from that. So I know in my life, I gave very serious thought, and I wrote, and I've got 5 purposes. I got 5 whys in my life. And then this was many, many years ago. And then when I wrote those down and clarified those, okay, now what are my guiding principles? And it's hard to narrow them down because I believe in so many things, right? It's like, but just what really can guide me on a day-to-day basis in terms of purpose and principles. And honestly, it's massive for me, because it gives me a reference point by which to navigate this crazy world that we're in today. Now, I don't feel compelled to buy into the latest social trend in America. And candidly, a lot of the social trends are just flat out toxic and negative. Not all, some are really good. But know your why, know your purpose, and know your principles.
Man, so
and then
good.
live that way.
And another thing I've stolen from you several times, but you talked about it, is on social media or whatever, pay attention to what you pay attention to.
Pay attention to
what
yeah.
your education platforms, who you're hanging out with, things like that. So, man, this is so good, Tim. Thank you so much. A couple of closing questions for you. Key factor of success. for someone? What would you name? What would you say that is?
Mindset and skill set.
We talked about mindset. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, mindset and skill set, not talent. Talent is a gift, is something you receive in genetics, and mindset and skill set are things you develop through training. And you can have average talent and be massively successful with the right mindset and the right skill set. But mindset and skill set are all built, they're developed over time by repetitive work. And I work with USC football. I work with Notre Dame football still. Do some work with Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. We're teaching the same stuff again. Same stuff again that I taught at Ohio State. And that if you want to be great, I get it. And these are rooms full of young men who have tremendous talent. But so is every other team in the Big Ten. So is every other team and whatever. And so it's not talent. It's mindset and skill set.
Amazing. And you can build them. Favorite business book or leadership?
Overall favorite business book is Good to Great by Jim Collins. My favorite leadership book is It's Your Ship by Mike Abrashoff.
Gosh, I think I've heard that before and I've not read it.
It's a terrific book.
And then what about
he took the worst performing ship in the Navy, became the best performing ship in the Navy.
And then last question, favorite personal development book, if it's maybe less business or leadership oriented?
I read so much, Phil, so much. I'd have to go with The Talent Code by Dan Coyle.
What is that? I mean,
that addresses what I said. It's about where does greatness come from? How do you become great at your job or something in life, at a skill, and how talent is as relevant as people think. There's a number of books on it. Talent Code is the best, I think. Talent's Overrated is a great version of it. The Slight Edge is another one. I mean, there's a bunch of books on it, but Dan does a great job in The Talent Code.
And honestly, what stands out from that conversation is you're almost saying, I've read so many books, Phil, which should be a message for the audience. You can hear from Tim, his knowledge, his wisdom, his leadership, his communication style, everything is so good. And there's a reason for that. This is, I suspect you weren't exactly like this at UCLA several years ago, Tim. This has been developed over time.
I'd like to think I've grown some, Phil. Yes.
Tim, again, I want to thank you so much, not just for, I'm so excited for the impact this is going to have on people I know. It honestly warms my heart. So thank you so much. You've had such an incredible impact on me. Quite frankly, this has been an amazing discussion for me and reminding me how many things you've taught me, more than what I was, just on the surface. So I apologize for that maybe, but at the same time, thank you for that. And again, I just want to thank you so much. So I think you said everywhere where people can find out about you. Is there anywhere else, or you're good there?
No, just Twitter, X, if you will, LinkedIn, and our website is the best place to go.
Tim, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Signing off. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Moeller Real Estate, visit our website at www.moellerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.